You have to determine as a man what your priority is. If it's yourself, you're going to struggle. It's not going to work out. Your marriage will probably fail. Your kids will probably hate you. If your priority is your wife and kids, then that's awesome. And that's going to be a great thing. But there's a step higher. And if your priority is God, then everything else falls into place. And they're told, my son is trapped. He's 4.5 years old. He's in the back bedroom. Well, the fire has engulfed the entire kitchen, living room, hallway. And he was lifeless and not breathing. All these things that we had no control over were teed up for us. And shame on us if we screw up this time.
You're watching this, maybe you're not a firefighter, maybe you'll never be a firefighter, right? But how can you utilize some of these tools and techniques that Kastros is going to talk about to save your kids from screaming and causing your wife to go crazy because it's a Friday afternoon and they're home from school, right?
Yeah. We can have task saturation in our car.
Yeah.
We can have task saturation at home, in our office, in our mind. And you stop looking at the big picture of your life. That's no way to live. That's not living. It's just thrive. It's just surviving. If the head coach is too down in the tactical, in the weeds, he's going to miss the game clock. He's going to miss the big picture of the game plan. Without an eternal perspective, without faith, I don't know how anybody gets through this planet and how the world can be, how America can be, society can be. I don't know how you do it without it. That's just ego talking. It's just ego talking. I think if you look at anything in life, you can organize it through a task, tactical, strategic level, whether it's your family, your job, your life goals, whatever. You're going to do things in your life and your career, maybe, or in your organization that are going to challenge the status quo. And if you know it's the right thing to do, don't let those people deter you.
What advice would you give to us, other dads who are looking to level up in their marriage, their kids' lives, and in their professional acumen?
Ooh, small question.
Small question. Dad, thank you for joining me today. This is a humbling, impressive, empowering, amazing conversation that I'm about to have with Andoni Kastros. He was a chief with Sacramento Metro Fire Department. He is a man of faith, and he gives wisdom to people like you and me that we sorely, sorely need. Every ounce of this conversation is truly profound from my perspective. I enjoyed every minute of it, and I took so much away that I can learn to be a better father, husband, and most importantly, man of God. So if you're interested and you find this interesting and helpful and you want a little bit of a memento to move forward so you can move forward in your life as well, comment below. I will send you, for the first 3 guys that comment below and say that they want this, his challenge coin. So this is the challenge coin that Anthony Kastros gave me back when I was just entering into the fire service. And I kept it with me for so many years. And my car was actually broken into about a year and a half ago, and this was taken with it. It was pretty significant bummer. And the fact that he came today and he brought me some new ones of these really means a lot. And I think it'll mean a lot to you too. So if you want one, I've got 3 left. So make sure to comment below, and I'll reach out to you and I'll get it sent over to you. So from there, I hope you enjoy this conversation. I think it will change your life. I really do mean it. And we'll get right to Andoni Kastros. Truly proud, Anthony Kastros, to call you a friend now.
Absolutely, brother.
And it's a true honor to be sitting here in your hometown.
Yeah, it's pretty great.
Just up the street from Carmel.
Yeah.
And this isn't too bad of a backdrop at all. So I'm truly excited. So Anthony Kastros, definitely have you introduce yourself. But first and foremost, some of your friends, who I consider myself one, call you by Andoni.
Andoni.
Yeah,
Andoni.
Kastros.
Yeah. It's the Greek version of Anthony.
Yeah. So talk to us about that amazing name, and tell us a little bit more about yourself, sir.
Well, it's an honor to be here, brother. Thank you for watching, everybody. Hopefully this will be of use to you in some fashion. So I'm of Greek descent. Both of my parents my grandparents all came over on the boat. And so Anthony Andoni Kastros is my name. My middle name is Andoni, which is Greek for Anthony, and it's also my dad's name. So we didn't use a junior for me because the Greek heritage, it was Anthony II. But I was raised in a big Greek family. I was the youngest of 5. My siblings were a lot older than me. My closest sister was 9 years older than me. My brother was 18 years older than me. There's 5 of us. So I was blessed with a lot of great influences, both my uncles, aunts, obviously parents, grandparents, and my brothers and sisters.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then you born and raised out here in California?
Born and raised here in Carmel, California. Blessed to be here, and spent most of my career in Sacramento, California, where I was a battalion chief for the Sacramento Metro Fire District.
Got it. Yeah. And we'll get into some of the firefighting components. Anybody who's watching that wants to learn more about the fire service, you are absolutely the man to speak to. Let's kind of stay a little bit high level, though.
Okay.
From your perspective for men in society today, what's the biggest challenge you see that men face in today's society as things have been changing?
I think it's being men. I think it's being men, and what I mean by that is that I think that society doesn't even know what a man is. And I'm not trying to be political. It's not about a political affiliation or left or right or anything like that. It's just there's just a lot of mixed messages for young men coming up, kids and young men and young adult males who are trying to find their way in the world. The role of the traditional father or man has been definitely redefined as things have progressed in our country and in the world. So I think that's one of the challenges. Because of that, that's an underlying current that creates confusion, and whether or not what role a man should play. Whether is chivalry the right thing or not? Opening a door for your wife or for a young lady, is that appropriate or is that offensive? The traditional roles in the home, is that okay or not? Certainly faith and other bedrock principles of the traditional, I'll call it family, that I was raised in anyway, have been obscured and changed. So I think the biggest challenge for men is just being a man. It's like, what is it to be a man? Is it offensive to have a traditional mindset? Is it offensive to for example, if you choose to have your wife stay home and raise your kids, is that something that you don't want to tell people at parties, or are they gonna chastise you? And if you and your wife choose to not have kids and both work, that's fine too. But it seems like in any case, there's a lot of challenging and differing opinions on what a man is, and so I think that permeates into the daily life of all the guys probably listening to this podcast.
It really is a challenge, especially for the men and women, of course, that you interact with from trained firefighters, which we'll get into. You have men who are straight out of high school, straight out of college. Yeah. They want to go into a profession, potentially, that by necessity requires some machismo, right? You need to be able to have the strength to break into a building, to carry the hose, to do a search in a house. And if that generation in particular has been so trained by social media, by all of the things around them, that those are bad things, I can imagine that recruitment and getting men in particular into those fields can be a challenge.
It can be. It's the challenge really isn't so much based on gender. There's obviously phenomenal female firefighters, male firefighters. It doesn't really matter what your gender, sexual orientation, any of those none of that matters. When somebody is trapped in a fire, or their family's trapped, or their house is burning, or one of their loved ones is not breathing, you don't really care what the person coming through the door looks like, what their personal life is, what their beliefs are, what their political affiliations are. You just want them to be able to do the job and save your family or save your home. That's really all that matters. And but to your point, I think that things like COVID have created a challenge for the fire service to recruit and retain good quality people, whether they be men or women.
Right.
It's really been a challenge of the past 5 years.
Yeah, I agree. And to your point, and we can kind of get into that too, but having the opportunity to walk into a house, if somebody is having a cardiac arrest, a family member, or things like that, not only walking in there and feeling that you know the skills, but also having the competence, the comfort level, and being very poised about the approach to that is absolutely huge. And in my view, that's half the battle.
Yeah.
So let's dive into that a little bit. We'll talk a little bit more about trained firefighters and what you do, but what kind of drew you in particular to the fire service?
In some ways I didn't have a choice, but I'm thankful for that. I was blessed to be raised in like I said, a big fat family full of love, and my oldest brothers 15 and 18 years older than I am. When I was born, they were, starting their fire service careers. By the time I was 5 years old, they were, this was the early 1970s, and they were starting their fire service careers. So I was literally born in a firehouse, raised in a firehouse, climbed on old fire trucks. And that gave me a real sense of adventure and joy and fun. And watching them interact with all of the other firefighters and learning good and bad habits. A couple of them got me in trouble, of course, because this was the 70s and it was primarily a male workplace.
Right.
So it was kind of funny and fun to grow up in that era. And so I found myself going to college and wanting to start thinking about my career path. And even though I thought I was going to go into business, I studied business. That was my career path as far as education went. I realized I want to be a firefighter, and that just took off from there. And that was in the late 80s. Yeah.
And then from there, you progressed, moved up.
From there, I've been very fortunate. I was had a 32-year career, and my last 13 years were spent as a line battalion chief in Sacramento Metropolitan Fire District, which is a 40-station department. It's a very large department in Sacramento, California. It's very diverse as far as our skill set, our workforce, we call ourselves all risk, so we handle everything from water rescues and hazardous materials and tactical rescues to obviously fires, vegetation fires, structure fires of all kinds, medical aids of all kinds, vehicle accidents. And we also have an urban search and rescue team, and that I had the opportunity to go to New York on 9/11. On the day of the Twin Towers coming down, I deployed to New York on 9/11 as part of our urban search and rescue team. So it's been an amazing series of experiences in serving.
I mean, having been, that was my first day of college, 9/11. Obviously, it was a massive change for all of us. But just since you brought it up, how was that experience going out there?
It was a tough experience on multiple levels. Obviously, the first one was we had never prepared for a disaster of that magnitude. Urban search and rescue teams were usually designed for natural disasters, not man-made disasters. But it was real personal because we had a lot of friends in the FDNY that we had trained with, because our urban search and rescue team was one of only 28 in the entire nation that were supported by FEMA, and New York City had a team as well. And so we had met each other through classes and conferences and trainings across the country, and so we knew some of these brothers that died, and we didn't know they were dead at the time. We just knew that they were probably trapped or dead. And as the 11 days ensued of our deployment, we learned about those who died and those who lived. And somebody you thought had died, you'd run into, in the middle of the rubble, and you think you see a ghost, and you realize, oh my God, you're alive. I thought you were dead. And then you'd find out from him that 2 other guys died that you knew. And it was just a really emotionally draining deployment because it was so personal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Defining moment for everybody in the country.
Yeah.
Especially for the fire service.
Well, I think the thing was, what I found coming back from that deployment, we saw a different America that we saw going in.
Yeah.
The United States were united. For a short period of time after that, we had a common enemy. We were under attack, and everybody united, and there was no difference. Political parties and all these other things that divide us nowadays just vanished for a little while. People would let you in traffic. American flags were flying everywhere. I remember coming back that night that we arrived back at the Air Force Base in Northern California. We had about an hour drive back on a bus from about 2 a.m. from the Air Force Base where we landed back to our home in Sacramento, and every single overpass had fire engines and cop cars and American flags, and we were escorted the whole way by different agencies. And we were kind of in a cocoon for that 11-day deployment. We weren't watching the news. We were the news. We were in it. The closest thing we had to any sense of what was going on outside was an occasional F-15 or F-16 would fly overhead, and we're like, whoa, this is this is different. But we were so engrossed in the work that we didn't really understand the consequences to the nation and to the psyche and the culture of the American public. And so when we got thrust back into the world, it was really weird because we were treated in a way that made us all uncomfortable. We were treated like celebrities and heroes, and we weren't. We never thought of ourselves as that even remotely. Unfortunately, the destruction of 9/11 became really a body recovery.
Yeah.
Our main mission was recovering body parts, not even entire bodies, but body parts. And so the last thing we felt like was any form of hero or like we had even done any good. So that was weight on all of us too. And I was personally going through a divorce at the time. That was my personal, on top of the deployment, the stress of that, knowing friends who died. I was personally going through a dark time for me, and my wife and I were separated. We were going to divorce, and I felt even more alone because we'd have nights where everyone go and call their loved ones, call their families, call their wives, and I didn't have anybody to call.
Right. And
it was a very dark time for me. Fortunately, one of my friends, his wife was sweet and dear enough to check in on me. She knew what I was going through, and she just checked in on me. And to this day, she's one of the very few people I call on 9/11 or text just to say hi. And I've done it every single year since because she was there for me.
Yeah.
There's probably only 3 people that I'll talk to on 9/11 about 9/11, and they're people I deployed with or hurt.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, thank you. I mean, obviously, it's a subject that you don't think of or talk about much externally. So thank you for that.
Yeah, my dad was in World War II, and he was 52 years old when I was born. So I was kind of an accident. My name should have been Dolt or Oops. But, my 18-year-old brother at the time talked to me about, when Pop found out that Mom was pregnant with you, he sure was pissed off. You weren't expected. And growing up, like most World War II veterans, he didn't talk about the war. And those of us who went to New York, we rarely talk about that. It's just, I've never been back. I've never wanted to go to the museum. It's just something that's not.
Of course.
Yeah.
Yeah. You lived it.
Yeah.
In your early fire career, what was one call that kind of defined the profession for you and made you know, okay, this is it for me. I'm gonna push forward as this.
Well, it's probably my first fire. I mean, I was young. I started out, my first 4 years was as a volunteer firefighter right here in Carbell, California. And it's a very small town. It's 1 square mile. It's affluent. There's not a lot of action.
Yeah.
But the first fire I ever had was in a little restaurant called the Tuck Box. And I just remember the smells. I remember the action. I remember just the sense of adventure and the sense of fun and awe of being there. It was like, oh yeah, this is good. Then my next one was a tactical rescue we had over a cliff. We had to retrieve down a place called Monastery Beach because there's a monastery that looks down on this beach that is a really bad undertow. There's surfers don't go there. Divers are deterred from going there. Well, this guy was on the cliffs and fell and broke his femur, which is a massive problem because it's the biggest bone in your body. So I was fresh out of EMT school, and I learned how to apply a hair traction splint in EMT school, and I think I applied it 3 months later on an actual patient that we had to use a Stokes to get him off the cliffs with a rope rescue. And that was like, man, this is amazing, So those are probably the 2 for me.
Yeah, now it's in your blood.
Yeah.
Now you're ready for it.
Yeah, exactly.
I think back on, I became a volunteer firefighter right around 2000, 2001, same thing. Now I'm a volunteer firefighter. The 2 things that really stuck back with me, 2 separate calls. One, we're in the Genesee area of Colorado. So just as you come up into the foothills on Interstate 70, so heading up to the mountains to go skiing area. We had a super snowy night, and we had a crash, typical crash that you have. And we had one of the departments that was down there facilitating the response. And then, of course, a tow truck that was coming to clear the scene, lost control, blew through the scene, killed 2 of the individuals on the scene that were in cars and hit a firefighter. So you can imagine the first call that's coming out as I'm listening to this is frantic. The responding agency on scene was calling for help, and we, Genesee Fire, were called in to take over command of the incident. So our engine came down. The officer, volunteer officer, was completely frantic as well, right? So he spoke high cadence, high voice on the radio, didn't give any direction. And when we showed up onto that scene, naturally, all the other responders scattered, right?
Yeah.
They did what they thought they needed to do because they had no direction.
Yeah.
And I'm sitting there, I'm watching this and thinking as a 17-year-old kid, is this how we manage emergencies?
Is this normal? Is this how we're supposed to do it?
Yeah. And that stuck with me. And then fast forward another 2 months, we're at a structure fire. It's a chimney fire. So I'm sure you've fought those, right? They're inside the walls of the chimney. So hard to get out. And I'm sitting in there and we're trying to spray it from the outside. We're trying to get it from the inside. And this thing just is not knocking down at all. And I'm thinking, just like that other lieutenant, what are we going to do? We got to back out. I'm starting to get really agitated about this. And the chief came in. He stood right next to me, calm, confident. He said, here's what we're going to do. You're going to pull down this wall. You're going to stay right where you are, and you're going to put this fire out, and we are saving this house. All of a sudden, I had this relaxation in my shoulders. I was able to focus, and we were able to move forward. The dichotomy of those two calls has and will forever stick with me. And, you know, that brings me to the first time seeing what you do at Trained Firefighters, seeing how you spoke to my peer firefighters at FDIC that day, and how your approach to an incident from a task, a tactical, and a strategic level can profoundly affect the way that you manage those emergencies. So I only set all that up and tee that up to say, let's have a quick discussion about the save call.
El Camino.
Yeah, El Camino, if we can. And first, before we dive into the specifics about the El Camino save, you know, I want to also tie this into, you're watching this, maybe you're not a firefighter, maybe you'll never be a firefighter, right? But how can you utilize some of these tools and techniques that Chief Kastros is going to talk about to save your kids from screaming and causing your wife to go crazy because it's a Friday afternoon and they're home from school, right? So we face those stressful situations at work, at home, and how we can use that stress to define who we are and how we respond. But describe that situation if you can, and how you prepared both your fellow firefighters and the command that you had, and how you personally prepared as you were driving to that incident.
Yeah, well, I appreciate that. This fire happened in 2010. It was August 10th in the morning. We were dispatched to a fire at a Goodwill store, and that pulls a lot of equipment. A lot of apparatuses on the road going code 3 to this fire. Well, it ended up, the update was that it was actually an extinguished sign fire. It was like nothing. The alarm system went off. That's where we got dispatched. So it was clear this wasn't going to be much of anything. And at the same time, dispatch told me that we had a second fire being dispatched in our same battalion. This was an actual apartment fire with a child trapped. So this became the instant priority. So I deployed the resources going to the Goodwill store. There was nothing, to the apartment fire.
Let's go ahead and divert everybody from the Goodwill fire to the apartment fire and backfill that Goodwill fire.
That was a huge thing that we'll talk about later on why that played a huge role in this event.
9-7's on 07 for roll call to El Camino. We're going to suspend roll call. We've got a working fire with the victim trapped. 9-7's assuming El Camino command. It's going to be a 2-story garden-style apartment complex. Command post is located across the street on the A side. It's going to be an offensive strategy, repeating potential victim trapped in apartment 4-5.
So we ended up going to this apartment fire. There's a child trapped on the second floor. The dad comes out. He meets the crews out at the street. I'm there with them. I set up the incident command system. I'm setting up command. And they're told, my son is trapped. He's 4.5 years old. He's in the back bedroom. Well, the fire has engulfed the entire kitchen, living room, hallway, and one of the bedrooms of the apartment. And it's blowing out the back slider on the back side of the apartment. And it's getting into other apartments via the attic space and the door that he left open into the breezeway. And so because we had diverted and we were already committed to the one fire at the Goodwill store, a second alarm was automatically dispatched. So this brought me 25 resources. Normally you get, half that.
110, upon your arrival, you're going to assume a rescue group. You've got Truck 106 working for you. We've got a confirmed rescue. Got Truck 106 working for you, your rescue group.
And so
resources meaning separate apparatus.
So different fire engines, fire trucks, ambulances, different chief officers, they're coming at this incident really quickly. They all know that there's a child trapped, which for firefighters, that's a rare occasion where you have a victim en route, and everyone's going to be a little more adrenaline bumped. Like you were saying earlier, the voices are going to go higher.
Yep.
The cadence is going to go faster.
Hazmat command, what's your ETA? Truck 106 command. Are you able to possibly split and give me vertical ventilation if we need it?
But my job was to keep everybody calm. And so Long story short, we were able to initiate fire attack, rescue, and pull out this little boy from the back bedroom.
We got a victim right there now, right there. Copy, we got the victim on the command post side.
And because of the hydrogen cyanide and the CO, he was lifeless and not breathing. However, he was in the back bedroom away from the fire, which was his parents' bedroom, and he was under a wool blanket in Sacramento in the summer, which is never unheard of, but it covered his face enough to prevent the heat from getting in his lungs. The CO and the hydrogen cyanide rendered him lifeless, not breathing, paralyzed his respiratory system. However, that blanket kept the heat from incinerating his lungs, which gave him a fighting chance. When our crews dove in, fire started coming at them immediately. They dove out with him. We transported him to the hospital, and long story short, this lifeless little boy, after being in at the Shriners Hospital for a week on a ventilator in an induced coma, walked out after a week by the grace of God. And the real part of this story that I think is most compelling is not that. It's what happened 4.5 years earlier. 4.5 years earlier, we had a fire similar where we actually lost a dad and his 2 kids. It was an apartment fire, just like this one, early in the morning, just like this one. 2-story apartment, virtually the same situation, different complex. And in this case, the dad went in to get his 2 kids out, and he succumbed to the flames, and all 3 of them perished. And I'd only been a battalion chief for a year, and it crushed me. I was a brand new dad. I just become a dad. And so now I've got this little baby girl at home. I'm 1 year incident commander, and I just lost a dad and his 2 kids, and it severely impacted me. I left that fire in tears. I was devastated, as were all my crew members. And what pissed me off was our fire department was only 5 years old, and we still had no standard operating guidelines. We had no training. We had very little training for this kind of incident. We had very little incident command and officer development training. And so I basically said, look, this can never happen again. So I instituted a bunch of training in my battalion. We started doing everything differently, and we challenged our assumptions, and we trained more, and we learned about the best practices that hadn't really been applied yet in our organization. And of course, you get critics, right? Everybody thinks you're a renegade, and you're just doing it to show off and to look good and make it about yourself. And that was the last thing it was about. So for those of you guys listening, you're going to do things in your life and your career, maybe, or in your organization, that are going to challenge the status quo. And if you know it's the right thing to do, don't let those people deter you. And there was a lot of critics, but they hadn't gone through what we went through on that fire. They hadn't lost 2 kids and a dad. And so 4.5 years of trial and error and going back to the drawing board and recording my fire. I started recording all my fires, which everybody was worried about liability. Oh my God, it's liable. What if we look bad? Well, we do look bad. That's why I'm doing this.
Exactly.
So let's get better by using basically game film. We used basically this game film to review our fires, and we got better at it. And we challenged ourselves, and we got better. And then 4.5 years later, we had this fire where we saved this little boy. And for those of you who aren't firefighters, you can find the video on YouTube. It's called the El Camino Fire with Rescue on YouTube. El Camino, 2 words. And you can watch this short 5.5-minute video of this fire. And this time we left the fire, and I had tears of joy, tears of redemption, tears of deliverance. Like, thank you, Lord, that we were able to save this little dude and apply what we learned. And by the grace of God, that was in 2010, and here we are in 2025, and our curriculum that we used on that fire is now nationwide, a best-selling book I wrote with a friend of mine named Brian Brush, came out in 2024. It's not even been out a year yet. We're in our 4th printing. And I guess my lesson to those of you guys listening is, when you know there's a change that needs to happen in your life, whether it's in your own life, in your family, in your home, or at work, or in your church, your ministry, whatever you're doing, and you know it's the right thing to do, do it. And expect to have resistance, expect to have naysayers, expect to have people who think you're crazy. But if it's the right thing to do and you stick with it long enough, you'll prevail. And that's what this was all about for us. So
it's incredibly inspiring. And just to take a step a little bit deeper into it, I alluded to it earlier, right? The tactical strategy. What was profound for me as I was growing in my fire career and how I've taken those exact lessons into my life as a father with 3 children is those initial arriving firefighters, the probies that just came off of the academy. They knew the task backwards and forwards.
Yeah.
Those firefighters that were going around to the end knew how to throw a ladder. They knew how to make entry. They knew how to do a search because they'd done it thousands of times in the academy. They're also task saturated, right?
Yeah.
So they have no idea what's happening of the fire behavior above their head. They have no idea.
Yeah, they don't even see it.
Yeah.
They're tunnel visioned. They can only see what's right in front of their face, and they have auditory exclusions. They don't hear the radio. They don't hear what's going on around them. And they're very susceptible to getting in trouble and getting hurt, despite them thinking that they're going to go save somebody. They could become a victim themselves.
Which is why they need an officer
Yeah.
on their rig that is tactically focused.
Yeah.
So as you're pulling up to that incident, you know exactly what you need, right? You need a search group.
Yeah.
And you can specifically say what they were. You needed a fire attack group, and you needed to have people come in and backfill them. So when you're assigning those off, that officer is no longer task saturated. That officer is there making sure that the firefighters are doing their job and looking at the tactics to make sure that they stay safe.
Yep, exactly. And we took that 25 resources I mentioned in the beginning, 25 fire engines, fire trucks, ambulances, fire chiefs are all coming to this fire, and chaos is ensuing. And I reduced the span of control down to 4 to 1. And like Ryan said, it's basically a fire attack group, which is focused on deploying the hose lines, putting the fire out, and getting a water supply from a hydrant. The rescue group, which is focused on getting the little guy out, and also searching all the adjacent apartments for potential victims. A roof division or ventilation group that focused on vertical ventilation, cutting holes in the roof to get the smoke and heat out, and a medical group to receive this little guy and whisk him off to the hospital. And if you don't have all of those happening at the same time, and you miss something, any one of those out of the equation, and that little guy's not going to live. And like I mentioned before, we were already going to another fire, and the term we use is turnout. We turned out to go to this other fire, and being on the road already, going to this other fire at the Goodwill store, saved us at least 2 to 3 minutes that we wouldn't have had we not been already dispatched this other fire and then just simply diverted. We literally had to pass the apartment fire to get to the Goodwill store fire. So we were already there. So on top of that, I mentioned that he was under a wool blanket. He was also in the back bedroom. All these things that we had no control over were teed up for us. And shame on us if we screw up this time, right? And so I tell people that I think God was watching over us that day, and that's why that little guy walked out. And it's no doubt in my mind that that's what happened. And so it's been a pleasure and a privilege and a humbling opportunity to go around the country and teach the lessons learned. And as Ryan's talking about, this isn't just about firefighting, it's about life. I think we'll talk about size up, and we'll talk about task, tactical, strategic as it applies to life, because when you're able to organize your life better, you're going to be more effective in it. That's just the law of nature, right? If you're more organized and you know your plan, you're going to be more effective. So,
and that goes to the third component, which is you had all of your tactical operations assigned, but the only reason you were able to do that is because you were strategically set back in your car, window cracked, and you were focusing on the strategy of the entire incident, so you can see the bulk of it.
Yeah.
So just 30, 45 seconds from a strategic perspective for that call in particular, kind of what's going through your mind?
So, as you mentioned, as the incident commander, I'm at the strategic level of the incident. The buck stops here. But you can imagine with 25 resources coming, I can't have my span of control. Ideally is 3 or 7. 5 to 1 is about the best, not 25 to 1. I'm going to lose control. The radio traffic's going to be crazy. So I have a gap between myself at the strategic level command post and the crews working at the task level in the fire. There's a gap there. We call it the tactical gap. That's the space between me and them. In this case, it's about 100 feet wide, and it was in the back of the building, and I'm in the front across the street. So I can't possibly know or see everything that's going on. The radio traffic, again, is paralyzed and bottlenecking. So communications are shot. Accountability is shot. Risk assessment is shot. All the things that are needed to have a successful outcome, let alone keep firefighters from getting hurt, are now being blown out because of this gap. Both distance-wise, radio traffic-wise, span of control, and also just situational awareness. So the firefighters working inside are too close to see the big picture, and I'm too far away to see the big picture. So I need that person in between in that tactical space. And those were my fire attack, rescue, medical, and roof division or ventilation supervisors. They were my eyes and ears. They were my ambassadors out in that sweet spot in between me and the actual fire building, up close, up against the battlefield, if you will. And they give me information and or resource requests, and I support that. I'm able to then think ahead of the incident further. Do we need more resources? In the case, obviously not in this case. But what if we have a firefighter trapped? What if we have another victim we don't know we have? And as you're mentioning, I think it's important that we help transfer and transmit these lessons to life. Task, tactical, strategic. I think if you look at anything in life, you can organize it through a task, tactical, strategic level, whether it's your family, your job, your life goals, whatever. So, yeah.
It's 100% changed my life. And obviously I'm asking you these questions because they have truly helped to guide me as a man in all facets of life. And just like you said, right? If you have a couple kids in the house, you're trying to clean up for dinner and the kids are bonkers going off the walls, screaming and getting loud and speaking faster is not going to ease the situation.
No. More chaos.
Calm down, talk with your kiddos, grab them by the shoulders, look them in the eye. I need you to clean up while I get food ready. And then you can step back. So all of those same components, if you're coaching a little league softball team, same thing. How are those little components going to apply? And it's the best feeling in the world, as you've said, to do that on an emergency scene. But it also is the best feeling in the world as a dad to just be able to control your life a little bit better.
Yeah, it's chaotic. We can have task saturation in our car.
Yeah,
we can have task saturation at home, in our office, in our mind. We can become task saturated, where we are just so inundated with thoughts, and I have to do this, and checklists, and deadlines, and I got to go shopping, I got to get dinner, I got to pick up the kids here, I got to do that over there, and you stop looking at the big picture of your life, and you stop looking at the long-term goals and the vision and the overall trajectory of your life. You're just surviving. That's no way to live. That's not living. It's just thrive. It's just surviving.
Right.
It's existing. And so things suffer, like your ability to have an awesome marriage, your ability to communicate well with your wife, your ability to be an effective father, your ability to communicate with those around you and be looking at the big picture while allowing and supporting those in that tactical space to directly supervise the task level folks. So if you look at a home, like you said, making dinner, my wife and I are great at teamwork. We have different personalities, but we're on the same exact page on what we want. God, family, and everything else is after that. We have 2 beautiful daughters. Well, there's a lot of times where she's the incident commander, she's the boss at the strategic level, and I'm tactical in the morning getting the kids to school. And there's different times. Maybe we're having dinner and I'm strategic, or we're talking about, long-term things like kids' college and so forth. When you have discretionary time, like it's not, 7:45 and the kids have to be at school at 8 and it takes 14 minutes to get to school. That's not discretionary time. So having those pre-designated roles of who's the boss this morning. Okay, that's gonna be my wife. She's the boss. I'm gonna be tactical and go from there. But on the long-term stuff like finances or vacation, or we're putting a new roof on our house. I literally talked to her about that today. There's plenty of discretionary time. We don't have to argue. We don't have to get stressed. We don't have to have chaos. We can slow down and we can think about it. And that, to me, the roof project is a tactical portion. The guys putting the roof on the house, they're the task level. They're working.
Yep.
My wife and I kind of balance between tactical or strategic and tactical on this. And there's things that sometimes she'll say, that's in my shop. Get out of my shop, she'll say. Get out of my shop, which means back off, dude. Get out of my business. Don't micromanage me. And that could be the kids. It could be a number of things. Where I'll say the same thing to her. Honey, you're getting in my shop. And that's usually a one-way street.
I like
Usually I'll say that to her. It doesn't it doesn't work going that way. It works going this way. So the point is like right now, we're putting a new roof on, but we're also putting in a new bathroom in our master bathroom. And we also had a septic deal we had to fix and a bunch of other stuff. Well, I'm kind of the IC of that. I'm the general contractor, if you will. And the tactical is her in the sense that she's picking out what, like, I want to make sure we get this, or we get that style tile, or we get this type of roofing color. And I can't just dismiss that and say, oh, I just need to get this done. No, there's discretionary time. And so I knew my wife would want to know and pick out the color of the roof. I'm not going to just arbitrarily make that decision. So, hey, honey, here's some choices. You know, she's out of town at her parents' with our youngest daughter for a couple of days. What do you think? And that's me giving her the tactical and empowering her to say, what do you think? Instead of, hey, I made this decision. This is what we're doing. Get over it, kind of thing. You don't know about roofs. It's condescending. It's rude. It's disrespectful. And it takes away her ownership in the whole thing, right? And then the task level is the workers, the contractor and his crew. That's just one. We also have tile guys. We have bathroom guys, plumbers, all these guys that are going to be doing our bathroom model, putting new windows in. So we're the general contractors, and she does a great job in that tactical space because she loves our home. We love our home. We love where we live. And again, this isn't a gender thing in the sense that, you know, I don't want people to watch this and go, oh, he's the man has to always be in charge. This is just explaining strategic, tactical, and task as it pertains to my family. My wife is at the strategic level and in charge on a lot of stuff. Trust me.
Yeah.
And so it's got nothing to do with, you know, who wears the pants or any of that stuff. But it's just it's a systematic way to organize stuff. And then so we talk about college, vacation, all that stuff it's the same thing. Strategic, tactical, task. Yeah.
Yeah. It's a game changer.
Yeah, it's fun.
You've had a couple medical scares in your career.
Yeah.
That really kind of course, changed you, driven you. You willing to talk a little bit about that?
Sure, yeah. Yeah, normally this would be known as a HEPA violation, but I'll let it go. So what he's referring to is, and this is I think probably one of the best lessons I can offer today is, I've had 2 strokes. Now, of course, I look like a perfect male specimen as I sit here, certainly, of course. However, I am not. And when I was the ripe old age of 44, I had a stroke. And it was not cardiac related. It was stress-induced. And I didn't have any deficits, but I had instant blindness, just a ripping headache, and I was disoriented. And went to the hospital because of my age, and I didn't have the normal stroke-like symptoms, paralysis, dysphagia, all that. The ER doc said, "Oh, you have a migraine. Go home." And of course, I had a stroke. So the next morning, I'm still not right. My wife takes me to the firehouse, who takes me to the hospital in an ambulance, and she gets in the doctor's face and said, "Hey, look, butthole, my husband is not right. Give him an MRI.
Yeah,
none of this, go home crap." Well, we found out I had a stroke. And I had a full workup, cardiac and everything else, and I had a heart monitor to my chest for 2.5 years, and it had no arrhythmias, no typical AFib. It wasn't due to a cardiac event as much as it was due to stress. The stress caused a vasospasm in my brain. The blood vessels in my brain spasmed. It's like the ultimate worst migraine in the universe you could ever have, that makes you blind basically and shuts you down. So it took 4 months to recover. I went back to work. And what I learned was that I allowed this stress in my life to get the best of me. I'm not going to blame anybody. I teach my daughters to this day, there's no victims in this house. I'm not going to let you be, we live in a world of victimhood and victims, and we do not have victims in this house. You're not victims. And they'll tell you that. They'll say, "Daddy says no victims." And it's true, because I know what victimhood really is. We both do, right?
Yeah.
We know what victims look like. They're usually bleeding, and we can see their brain.
Yeah.
So despite what society says, no victims. So instead of blaming external conditions, I blame myself. I said, I allowed this stress to overwhelm me. I could have blamed my bosses. I was pissed at them at work. I could have blamed my commute. I had a long commute. I could have blamed my business that was a lot of work on top of my fire department job. I could have blamed 1,000 things, but it was me. I allowed it to impact me. Well, I recovered, went back to work. Now, some of the things I was doing leading up to the stroke were symptoms and signs I should have seen. I should have known better, and the warning signs were there. I was drinking too much, not belligerent, not every night, but just more than the average thing. I was popping 5 hour energy drinks like they were breath mints. I was drinking too much coffee, and I was having a lot of headaches, and I had a short temper, especially at work.
Yeah.
Well, boom, stroke happens. So recover. I'm going to make life changes. I stopped drinking. And guess what? Over the course of the next 4 years, it happened again. And I'm an idiot. Now I'm like, great. So a second stroke, 4 years later, same ideology, same exact leading up, all those things I was doing wrong, not working out, not managing my stress, allowing people at work to piss me off. This probably sounds familiar to some of you guys. Boop, same exact thing happened. And I was like, oh my God, how did I let this happen again?
Right.
4 years later. And by the grace of God, I recovered again. And that stroke was in 2017. And so that was 8 years ago. So thank God, I was able to go back to work, and I finished my last few years full-time, normal. And I really made a point, like, no more drinking, stress management, and boundaries and priorities and strategic tactical tasks in the personal life. A lot of prayer, a lot of faith, a lot of grace from God. So, yeah.
So can you give me some examples of the things that you changed? Because I feel stress. We all feel stress, especially when it comes to work, especially when it comes to our family. Mm-hmm. It's lonely being a father, a husband. What were some of the things second time around? Okay, I tried this the first time. Can you just give me some more examples of what you changed?
This time, like, when I say I quit drinking the first time, that only lasted a few weeks.
Okay.
This was like, okay, lifetime, I'm not drinking anymore.
Yeah.
Coffee, never again. Stress, perspective, not hitting my head against the wall and being pissed at the wall. Okay, it's not the wall's fault that your head is a pulp. It's your fault. And so that's what I started doing. I started setting boundaries, not only around me as far as like work, but boundaries in myself as far as how I let things bother me.
Yeah.
Priorities. I had to go back to my faith and remember I have an eternal perspective and look at the big picture of life. I focused on my children, my kids, my wife more instead of trying to save the world. I thought I was the only person that knew how to command a fire, and I had to teach the whole world to do it. And it was going to kill me. It's a noble calling, right? I'm sure a lot of you guys listening have jobs that are very important, and it's easy to think that you're the only one that can do your job, the only one that can do it. And if I don't do it, who will? And it's so important. That's just ego talking. It's just ego talking, and it'll kill you. Ego. There's a dear friend of mine and mentor named Alan Brunacini. He used to say, egos eat brains. And that is a true statement. It's very easy to be part of a rescue team or incident commander, or a firefighter, or a fire chief trying to be better at saving lives. Who's going to argue with that? But when you obsess about it and you take it personal when other people don't agree with you at work, and you let it consume you, and you fail to see the warning signs that you're not sleeping well, you have headaches, you're short-tempered, you're drinking too much, you're drinking too much coffee just to get through the day. Those are all warning signs that you need to take a step back, or you're not working out, right? It's hard to have that balance. It's really hard.
What kind of started and made you really dive deeply into your faith?
Well, I was fortunate to be born and raised in, like I said, a Greek family, which is basically a Catholic type of faith. It's Greek Orthodox. And that gave me a foundation of a belief in God, of Jesus, and of heaven. And that was great. But as an adult, I wanted more. As I moved away from home, I realized that there's more to it. And so I was with a friend of mine working on an ambulance in the fire department, going on 15 to 20 calls a day in a ghetto part of Sacramento. And he would either be reading his Bible on the way to calls, going lights and siren up the road, or back at the station, he'd be reading something about Jesus or something. And I'm like, what is this guy got? He has a big guy, gentle giant, just a sweet dude. Like, man, I want what he has. So I started realizing there's more to this than this, So I started going to a non-denominational church, and I quickly became the drummer, playing in the worship team, the music team, and it was incredible. I started going to Bible studies, and I started studying my Bible, and I started going to men's retreats. And before you know it, I was teaching Bible studies.
Yeah.
And all I can say is hallelujah, because without an eternal perspective, without faith, I don't know how anybody gets through this planet, and how the world can be, how America can be, society can be. I don't know how you do it without it, you know. So that's kind of how it all started.
And you basically answered the question, but is faith in today's society, especially among men, fathers, people in general, is it needed today?
Absolutely. It is needed. God created us to be protectors and providers, despite what society says. And I'm not bad mouthing anybody that has a different opinion. You asked my opinion. And what we are created to do is, as men, we're created to do a few things. God wired us to provide, protect, and worship. And we provide by obviously working for our family, protect our family. The worship part is often misguided and over guided into other things other than God. It could be our job. You could become a workaholic. It could become booze. You're an alcoholic. It could be sex. You're a sexaholic. It could be money. It could be a sports team. We worship a lot of stuff. We're great at worshiping stuff in life. We just worship the wrong stuff. There's nothing wrong with loving a football team, or I love fly fishing, but I don't live for it. I don't worship it. I used to worship my job. I used to be a workaholic, and it almost killed me twice. And we have to remember that, number one, you're not going to have your job forever. You're going to retire and be with your family, whether they like it or not. And number two, you're not going to be on this planet isn't all there is. And so having an eternal perspective and realizing that things on this earth are temporary is a vital part of life. And I don't know how men do it without that. The traditional values that are in the Bible are under attack constantly. They're constantly under attack. And to be a Christian man in this day and age is really, really hard. It's never been easy for Christians, but it seems like the only people that are open game for criticism, for openly degrading, like mocking, is the Christian faith. Everybody else, it's politically incorrect to attack anybody else, but Christians are fair game. And it's sad. It's sad because I think, unfortunately, that has tarnished a lot of people from searching for faith or diving into faith. You know, it's kind of sad when you see it happen.
You know, for me personally, since I was born, both of my parents never once talked about faith. We never went to church. My father was a great man, my mentor of all time. I still to this day look up to him. He passed away in 2018 from cancer, way too early. It was a very sad side story. We had already had Bromley, our oldest, who's 9, and my dad, Thaddeus, and Bromley were like this. Bromley's name is Bromley Thaddeus Fields because we wanted to name him after him. My wife was pregnant with our second, Callan, and I already knew that he had cancer, and it had metastasized from his colon to his kidneys, so it was really going fast, and the only thing he wanted to do was stay alive for Callan to be born. Mm-hmm. And so we gave birth 2018, and the nurses, usually when you have kids these days, they try to keep you in the hospital for 48, 72 hours to do all the things.
Get the heck out.
I said, listen,
I saw Dad.
Yeah, my dad has maybe 2 days left to live.
Oh my God.
So we got Callan out, took him to my dad. He saw him, held him, smiled, and then within about 24 hours passed away.
Unbelievable. He literally was waiting. He was staying alive long enough for that.
Yeah, so he could hold Callan. So
amazing.
All that to say, my dad's my ultimate hero.
Yeah.
But we never went to church.
Yeah.
Period. Never talked about it. His belief was we are a moral, ethical family. Yeah. We do the right thing. We do the right thing for people. We don't necessarily need church. And I kind of grew up thinking there's no Jesus. There's no God. Yeah. There's no reason for this because, look, there's this grass right here, right? There's these bugs. They die, they go in the ground and all of that. Fast forward through 2020, all the challenges that we all faced during that time, we moved to the northern Colorado area and then started to really meet friends with some real core values who went to church regularly, who subtly but surely prodded me and my wife to start going to church. And finally, about a year ago, we said, yeah, let's go ahead.
That's
right?
so great. Love it.
So what's interesting is, you know, I'm on this journey to finding faith. And originally, for me in particular, you talk about being in the band for the worship. For me, that's super uncomfortable.
Yeah.
You're standing up.
Yeah.
You're singing these songs. People have their hands up.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah,
it's weird.
Where's
the chickens? We're gonna sacrifice chickens. What's going on?
Right.
Who's gonna kiss a snake? Yeah. Weird.
But what's interesting is when I sat down and the whoever, the pastor of the day would come out and deliver their sermon, the lessons that they taught, of course, were biblically based and referenced the Bible, but they were so profound for me, just as an agnostic at that point in time, to say, wow, this is a little good rev up for me for the week to go into the next week.
Yeah.
So that's kind of, you know, where I have been over the past, you know, year or so. So any guidance, any thought about just dipping your foot in the water? What's some ways for us, if you're watching this right now and thinking, well, maybe I'll give that a try?
Well, I think the first thing we have to realize is what you said, is that it's more than just bugs and grass. This world does have, it has a creator, and it was created by a plan. And to think otherwise, you know, what I always go back to is the book, The Case for Christ. The author in The Case for Christ set out to disprove the existence of Christ and the crucifixion. And he was an atheist, and he was a very scientific-minded guy. And he, in so doing, realized that he was now a Christian, because it took more faith to not believe in God and Jesus than it took to believe in him. And so I think we need to take a step back, a strategic level, and go, what's this all about?
Right.
Is this it? I'm just going to work and grind away and deal with life and then just go on the ground? Really? That's it? That's a heck of a way. That's a depressing thought. So I think when we come to grips with that, in whatever way that is, I think if we just open our hearts and pray to God, say, God, I don't know if you're up there, but I'm asking, because the Bible says, knock and the door will be opened. All we got to do is knock. We don't have to know it all. We don't have to be biblical scholars. We don't have to be good people. Jesus is the friend of sinners. He specializes in idiots like us, right? And the disciples were the original Dirty Dozen. They were a bunch of nitwits, murderers, sinful idiots.
Yeah.
And Jesus was able to use them. So I think the first thing is ask, and God will reveal himself to you. And two, don't feel ashamed. Don't feel that you're not worthy, that it's too late for you, that you're beyond redemption. None of us is. None of us is too late. Paul, one of the greatest authors of the Bible, used to be known as Saul, and he was the biggest persecutor of Jesus and of the faith. And then God spoke to him, and he changed his whole life, and his name was changed from Saul to Paul. It's never too late. This guy was the worst enemy of Christ, and he was changed to one of the heroes of the faith. So don't believe the lie that you're not okay, you're not good enough, it's too late for you, you're beyond redemption. Don't believe that. Your family needs better than that. And you're, you know, again, going with the traditional approach, you're the leader of your home and of your family. You have to be the one to walk the walk, and that goes for faith as well. So how do you do that? Get on your knees and ask God to reveal himself. Say, God, the word, it is written, knock, the door will be opened. And when you recite scripture like that, truth like that, God acts on it. He acts on it. So he will reveal himself to you. And then start looking for a church and listen to that prompting. And just start to read the Bible, and start with the New Testament is what I would recommend. And get a life application Bible, which is a great Bible for applying this stuff to life. And it gives context to every piece of scripture. It gives context. Why was this said this way? What was going on here? How come this was going on? You have your own little lesson going on below the scripture itself. So that's how I would start.
Life always, forever and always, will give you challenges, right? I mean, I know for me personally, the last year has been very challenging. My father obviously passed away
Yeah.
in 2018, but then my mom started getting sick.
Yeah.
And as an only child, dealing with the unknowns of why is my mom in a mental institution right now?
Yep.
Oh, turns out she's got dementia.
Yep.
Well, thank you for that. Okay, now let's move her there. Let's go through these challenges. And it can be very interesting to sit back and think, okay, why am I going through this right now? What is this all just the grass? Is this all
What's
just
the point of this?
the bad things that are happening in the world? What's the point of this? So that was kind of the catalyst for me from dipping my toe in.
Mm-hmm.
This is good information to just in the past, weeks and months. I'm going to go ahead and sit here. I'm going to pray. Why am I here in this position in this part of my life right now? What does it mean? How can I take this, learn from it, move forward, and succeed for my wife, my family, and for you, God, right? So I think that's where I'm at currently.
Yeah.
So what advice do you have? Okay, dip the foot in the water, starting to pray. How do you go deeper than that?
Well, I mentioned the Purpose-Driven Life book that I'm going to give you today. God didn't create us arbitrarily. He created us for a purpose. The 5 purposes are to worship him, to be more like Christ, to be more like God, to have fellowship, which is what this is right here, be with others, to minister to others and help them, and then to be on mission, which is to share the good news of why we're on this planet. Those are the 5 reasons God created us. So the book, The Purpose-Driven Life by Rick Warren, is a phenomenal book. It'll explain why on earth am I here? Why do we exist? Why did God create us? And it explains these 5 purposes very well. It's a 40 chapter, small, easy, like 2 to 3 pages each. 40 chapters, all small, designed to be read 1 chapter a day for 40 days because of the spiritual significance of 40 days in the Bible. It's a spiritually significant amount of time. It's a time of transformation. So the book isn't just meant to be read, and this is a good book. It's meant to hopefully help you transform on your understanding and transform your mind. The Bible says you'll be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Everything starts up here. How you think is how you speak, and then that's how you act, and that's who you are. And so that particular book is filled with over 1,000 biblical references. It's awesome. I read it often. I've led Bible studies in it. I've read it countless times. This past year, I read it again, just the first 40 days of the year, just to recalibrate, get back to the strategic. We go back to the incident command. And when I was the incident commander of that fire, I got to step back and see the big picture. Are we doing the right thing? It's like a head coach on a football team. If the head coach is too down in the tactical, in the weeds, he's going to miss the game clock. He's going to miss the big picture of the game plan. Excuse me. And so an incident commander is the same way. You have to look at the big picture. Well, as a dad and as a husband and as a man in your home, you need to step back and look at the big picture. And there's nothing more important than looking at eternity and faith and God and purpose. So
That's fantastic. Just a couple more questions for you.
hold on one sec.
By all means.
Bug in my throat. Okay.
Yeah, no, you're fine. So just 2 more questions, and we'll move forward with our day. So as a father, what advice would you give to us, other dads who are looking to level up in their marriage, their kids' lives, and then their professional acumen?
Ooh, small question.
Small question.
A little bit of topic there. I think it goes back to the big picture. It's the priorities. When we arrive on a fire, going back to that analogy, why have to, as the incident commander, determine what is our priority? What is our priority? Is it life? Is it incident stabilization? Or is it property and the environment? Life is the highest priority. You have to determine as a man what your priority is. If it's yourself, you're going to struggle. It's not going to work out. Your marriage will probably fail. Your kids will probably hate you. If your priority is your wife and kids, then that's awesome. And that's going to be a great thing. But there's a step higher. And if your priority is God, then everything else falls into place. Because God wants us and tells us to be the protectors and providers for our family, like we talked about. He wants us and equips us with the tools to do everything right, as long as it's in the right order and the right priority. When we get out of order, bad things happen. I had 2 strokes because I got out of order. I made it about my ego, thinking it was about this noble thing called the fire service and I'm going to save lives. And nope, it was just at the end of the day, it was my ego. Noble calling, but misinterpreted, misapplied. So whether it's your job or your family, it all, for me, it starts with the bedrock foundation of faith. You can't build a house without a strong foundation. You can't live a life or have a family without a strong foundation. So that's starts from there, and then family, and then your career, and then all those other things.
I ask this question to everybody that I talk to, and I've stolen it from Graham Cochran, who's another podcaster that I listen to. He calls it his golden rule. I call it my diamond advice. So you have 2 daughters, correct?
Yep.
Your daughters are all grown up. They're out of the house. They're adults. They're doing their thing. You've taught them as many lessons as you possibly can. They've forgotten all of them. Every single lesson you've ever taught them, except for one piece of diamond advice. What would that one piece of advice be that you would want them to take with them?
Well, it's not going to be anything a surprise after listening to this podcast, but it's going to be faith.
Yeah.
Keeping God first, remembering that Jesus is real and he died for your sins. As long as they have that, the rest will work itself out. It really will. I wish it was more complicated than that. I wish I came off as more scholarly and wise, but it's that. And I think about that all the time because I have a daughter who's 19. She's in her 2nd semester of her freshman year living in LA. I mean, during the fires, the whole bit.
Right.
So she's out of the nest. She's outside of our sphere of influence like she was. And pretty soon that only gets further away, to your point. And we talk to her all the time, we still pray with her, we talk to her, and the biggest thing is her faith is really, really strong, and I know as long as she has that, everything else will work out.
Will you lead us out with a prayer?
Yeah, that'd be awesome. Lord Jesus, thank you for this opportunity to share with these men and share with my brother Ryan. Thank you for the opportunity to be dads and husbands and to live in a great country. We pray that you watch over everybody on this podcast, and that you help us to be the men that you created us to be. Help us to understand you, to open our hearts to you, reveal yourself to us more each day, regardless of where we are on our walk, if we're never believed in you before or whether we've been Christians for our whole lives. Help us to have a deeper understanding, relationship with you, and help us translate that into our families. We thank you for this time. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.
That's right.